Most stories would have you believe Vikings pop out of the womb wearing horned helmets, which, by the way, weren't even a real thing. That myth came from an opera costume designer who thought, you know what these fierce warriors need? Some fancy headgear. But you start life like any other Norse child, on a farm. Born in the heart of Norway around 800 AD, life for a Viking child is pretty boring and mundane. You spend your days helping with farm work, learning which end of a plow to hold, feeding chickens that seem personally offended by your existence, and listening to your father's endless stories about that one time he maybe, just maybe, saw a frost giant that was probably just a very tall tree in the fog. So there I was, face to face with the frost giant.
Harold, it was a tree.
Woman, I know what I saw. It had arms.
Those were branches.
It moved.
It was windy.
It had a beard.
That was moss. We've been over this for 15 winters.
The children deserve to know about their father's heroic encounter.
With a pine tree.
I suppose next you'll tell them the time I fought a dragon was just a very angry moose.
Actually,
The moose breathed fire, and you know it! Your first weapon isn't even a sword. It's a pitchfork for cleaning out the goat pen. And your first battle is with a particularly aggressive rooster who's claimed the barn as his territory. All of this sounds boring, but don't worry though. We won't spend too long here, because the interesting stuff is about to begin. By age 15, you're barely recognizable as that farmer's kid. Your hair is intricately braided on the sides and bleached blonde using lye soap, because contrary to what most people think, Vikings were absolute peacocks about their appearance. That whole dirty barbarian thing? Complete nonsense. You bathe weekly, making you cleaner than most European kings who apparently thought perfume was a substitute for washing. You use combs made from antlers and even have a collection of grooming tools dangling from your belt like a 19th century influencer. Your arms are decorated with dark tattoos showing your achievements and family history. Think Instagram stories, but permanent and a lot more painful. Your teeth are filed with horizontal lines, a practice that terrifies your enemies and makes your local Viking dentist, yes, they existed, very rich indeed. Around your neck and arms, you wear arm rings given to you by your chieftain, a sign of loyalty and proof that you're not some common raider. Think of them as really expensive, really heavy employee badges. But being pretty isn't everything in Viking society. You've spent years learning to fight, and not just with axes. Vikings were walking arsenals. Sword, axe, spear, knife, shield, and probably a few backup weapons just in case. It's like being a deadly Swiss army knife in human form. Your shield alone is a work of art, painted with designs to tell your story and occasionally stop arrows from telling your final story. Your first raid comes after a brutal winter, when food stores run low. But before you even touch an axe or a sword, you learn the most important part of being a Viking: the ships. These aren't just boats. They're the most advanced vessels in the world. The famous longships can sail in 3 feet of water across oceans and slide right up onto beaches. They're so precious that some Vikings are buried with them. Though, hopefully that won't be you anytime soon. Think of them as the Viking equivalent of a Ferrari. Except this Ferrari can also be your house, battering ram, and eventually your coffin. What's a Ferrari? Oh right, wrong time period. Navigation isn't just about following the coast and hoping for the best. You learn to use a sunstone, a crystal that can find the sun even on cloudy days, which in Norway is basically every day. You learn to read the waves, follow the birds, and use a primitive sundial called a sunboard. You also learn that Vikings name everything: your ship, your sword, even that weird-looking rock that helps mark the way home. Your first battle isn't some glorious one-on-one combat. It's a shield wall, a tight formation where you and your fellow warriors lock shields together like a human tank. The guy next to you, he had a pickled fish for breakfast, and you're seriously reconsidering your position in the formation. But you learn quickly that most Viking fighting isn't about individual glory. It's about working together. Well, unless you're a berserker. Ah, yes, berserkers. Those guys who work themselves into such a frenzy they bite their shields and feel no pain. Think of them as Viking energy drinks personified. Before battle, they get so worked up they're said to take on the spirit of bears or wolves. They fight without armor, wearing only animal pelts, and are so hopped up on whatever combination of mushrooms and ritual they've got going on that they think they'll keep fighting even with fatal wounds. In fact, most berserker warriors think they're either blessed by Odin or completely insane. Probably both. Bjorn, you feeling alright there, buddy?
Roar! I am bear now.
Right. It's just that's your third shield this week, and those aren't cheap.
Odin demands violence.
That's not even the enemy. That's just a tree.
Tree looked at me funny.
Should we stop him? Last guy who tried is, well, he's technically two people now. How long until the mushrooms wear off?
I'm going to kill the ocean.
Thursday. But not all Viking warriors are wild-eyed berserkers. Some of your fellow raiders are shield maidens, female warriors who are just as fierce as any man. That shield maiden next to you in formation, she once took down 3 Saxons without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, you're still trying to figure out which end of the spear to hold. Between raids, life revolves around the Great Hall. This isn't just some boring feast hall, it's where everything important happens. You drink mead, lots of it, boast about your deeds, mostly true, and settle disputes, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. It's like a combination of Parliament, court, and the world's most dangerous pub. And speaking of drinking, Vikings take their mead hall games seriously. There's drinking chess, where each captured piece means taking a drink, storytelling contests, and something called flighting. Basically, it's a cross between a rap battle and a poetry slam, but with a lot more threats of disembowelment. Lose badly enough at flighting, and you might find yourself in a home gun. What's a home gun? Glad you asked. It's a formal duel used to settle disputes, and it has more rules than you'd expect. You fight on a cloak or a cowhide, limited space, and you get a specific number of shields allowed. Think of it as a UFC fight, but with axes and a lot more chances of dying because someone decided to insult your beard.
Your beard looks like something a goat coughed up. Oh, yeah? Well, your axe is so dull, it couldn't cut butter. What did you say about my axe? Home gone. Fine. Tomorrow at dawn. All right. Remember the rules. Stay on the cowhide. 3 shields each. Less talking, more fighting! Your axe, actually quite sharp. Your beard, not that goat-like. 3rd time this week I've had to come out here at dawn for you idiots. Next person who calls home gone while drunk is getting pushed into the fjord.
But Vikings aren't just about fighting. You're surprisingly good at board games, especially Nefertafel. Imagine chess, but where one player has a king trying to escape while surrounded by enemies. It's actually military strategy training disguised as entertainment, like Risk, but with a lot more immediate practical applications. When you're not raiding, drinking, or gaming, you might be participating in sports. Vikings loved competitive games. Wrestling, stone lifting, horse fighting, yes, that was a thing, and something called Natalaker, which was like hockey but with fewer rules and more broken bones. Then there's the magic. Yes, magic. Vikings believed in Theater, a form of sorcery that involved going into trances, predicting the future, and possibly cursing your enemies. It was pretty much like Nordic fortune-telling, but with a side of possible death curse. Funnily enough, it was usually practiced by women, but not because of the whole Nordic witch stigma, but because it was considered unmanly for men to do it.
I foresee your love life improving once you stop introducing yourself as Bjorn the Belcher at the mead hall.
By Odin's missing eye, what in the 9 worlds are you doing?
Dad, I can explain! This isn't what it looks like!
Are you performing Theater? What's next? Using a shield smaller than a barn door? Washing your hair twice a week?
Dad, it's 855 AD! Times are changing! Men can do magic now! Thor's brother does it!
Don't you dare bring Loki into this household! I raised you to be a warrior, not a fortune teller!
The spirits say you're being over-dramatic.
I'm going to the mead hall to drink until I forget I ever saw this. Tell your mother I died honorably in battle. So, how should I introduce myself to improve my love life?
Oh, and religion. How can we forget about that? Your religious life is complex. Sure, everyone knows about Thor and Odin, but there are dozens of gods and goddesses, each with their own domain. You might sacrifice to Thor for good weather, Odin for victory, or Freya for love. The blot ceremonies involved sprinkling blood on statues of the gods and on your fellow warriors. It's messy, but hey, if it keeps the gods happy. Trade is another huge part of the Viking life. You can find Viking graffiti in Constantinople, usually saying something like, Halfdan was here, Viking coins in Arabia, and Viking settlements from Newfoundland to Russia. That whole just raiders thing? More like the world's most aggressive international trading network. You're as likely to be haggling over silk prices in Baghdad as you are to be swinging an axe at someone. When not abroad trading or raiding, you might be attending the Thing, an assembly where laws are made and disputes settled. Yes, the people famous for raiding monasteries had a complex legal system. You can even take someone to court for insulting you with a particularly clever verse. There's literally a law against tactical poetry. It's like modern copyright law, but with more axes involved in the settlement process.
Next case, Olaf versus Sven, concerning a poetic incident at the market.
He composed a verse about my fishing skills, in front of everyone!
That doesn't sound so...
It rhymed, Olaf the Unlucky, with catches fish that taste yucky. And he added hand gestures. I was merely stating facts through artistic expression. Also, have you tried his fish? Even the cats won't eat it. That's it! Sven the Stupid, whose brain is so small!
Stop right there! Unauthorized counter-poetry is a serious offense.
Ha! Your rhymes are as bad as your fishing.
Both of you are banned from speaking in verse until next winter. And Olaf...
Yes?
He's right about the fish.
Marriage in Viking society is surprisingly progressive. Women can own property, initiate divorce, and run businesses. Want to divorce your husband? Just declare it in front of witnesses and give back the house keys. It's like a 9th century prenup. Marriage ceremonies involved exchanging swords. The bride gets an ancestral sword from her family to give to her husband, and the husband gives her a new sword. Nothing says, I love you like exchanging weapons. Medical practices are, well, interesting. Viking healers are skilled at stitching wounds and setting bones, but their medicine can be a bit questionable. Got a headache? Here's a mixture of herbs, possibly some moss from a skull, and a good luck charm. Need surgery? First, let's check what the runes say about timing. It's like WebMD, but with more references to what the gods want.
Seriously, man, I don't get any of your references.
Speaking of runes, they're everywhere. They're not just for writing, they're believed to have magical properties. Need good luck? Carve some runes. Want to curse someone? Carve different runes. Want to leave a message saying Bjorn was here? You guessed it, carve some runes.
Just carving a protection rune for my house. The zigzag for shield.
Wasn't that symbol shield when it points up, not down?
No, I'm sure it's probably, maybe. Oh.
What did you actually write?
According to this, I just invited every troll in the region to a feast.
Could be worse.
And apparently, I'm the feast.
You really should have paid attention in rune class. As you get older and more successful, you start thinking about your eventual death. Vikings don't do simple funerals. If you're important enough, you get a ship burial. They fill a ship with your weapons, tools, food, drink, and sometimes even sacrificed animals. Some chieftains are even buried with sacrificed slaves, though by your time that's considered a bit gauche, like wearing socks with sandals, but much, much, much darker. The grandest funeral of all is the ship burning. They put the dead warrior in their ship, along with all their possessions. The closest male relative has to light the pyre, but before that, there's a huge feast. Everyone drinks to the dead person's memory and swears oaths to honor their legacy. Then they push the burning ship out to sea, sending the warrior on their final voyage to Valhalla. But more importantly, your hope is to die gloriously in battle, ensuring your place in Valhalla where you can feast with Odin. Though secretly, you wouldn't mind ending up in the Folkvanga with Freya. She gets first pick of the slain warriors, and her hall is said to be pretty nice. Dying of old age, a straw death, is considered embarrassing. Imagine having to tell other dead warriors you were defeated by time itself.
So, how'd you die?
Glorious battle. I took down 12 men before a spear got me. You?
20 men and a bear!
I tripped on my axe.
At least it was a weapon. Better than Eric over there.
I told you that sheep was possessed by evil spirits.
New arrival. How'd you fall in battle, brother?
Well, old age.
Oh dear. Well, have you met Eric? He was killed by sheep. You can sit at his table.
It was a demon sheep.
Your legacy isn't just in how you die, though. It's in the sagas told about your deeds. Vikings love their stories, and the best ones get remembered in epic poems recited by skalds, basically professional poet historians. These aren't just any poems. They're complex verses with strict rules about alliteration and internal rhyme. Think Shakespeare meets heavy metal lyrics, but in Old Norse. So, here you are. Your beard is braided, your hair is bleached, your arms are ringed with gold and silver, and your ship is ready to sail. The gods are watching, the sagas are waiting, and there's a whole world out there to explore, or raid depending on how the negotiations go. You might end up trading spices in Constantinople, farming in Greenland, discovering new lands in the West, or dying gloriously in battle somewhere in between. Whatever happens, you'll do it in style, with a well-groomed beard and probably a really good story to tell in Valhalla.
It was a demon sheep.